Hi everyone. So today I'm going to do another one of my try a chapter Unhaul editions. And so I actually have 3 of these left to do. And so I'm going to record the beginnings, like this opening intro for each of these. So when you watch whenever the next one comes out or the next 2 come out over the next couple months, you might notice that I'm wearing the exact same clothes or that my thumbnail looks pretty much identical. And that is why I just thought it'd be easier to film all the intros together and then kind of like over the next couple of weeks do all of the reading of the first chapters, because then I want to do a big unhaul. So I'm not going to be posting these all back to back, but I'm just going to film them all right now. So I just want to give you that little sneak peek in the behind the scenes, just in case you're like, man, she's wearing that shirt all the time. It's all just in the same day. So today, the stack that I am talking about, I have 5 books that are all adult. So they're various genres, but they're all targeted at an adult audience. And so the first one is The Lost Continent by Bill Bryson. And I had read A Walk in the Woods last year, I think, and I really enjoyed it. And a long time ago, I bought a ton of his books. I have since gotten rid of a lot of them. I only have one of his books on my shelf that I still want to read. And this is one that I was just iffy about. It seemed like it could be interesting. I think this is kind of like him traveling around small towns in America. I at least want to try the first chapter and see. I just don't know if I love his writing. I know he's a really popular narrative nonfiction writer. I just don't know if he's for me, so I was going to give this one one chapter to find out if I am actually interested in finishing it. And this copy I got from a used bookstore. It's pretty beat up, so I'm not upset if I end up getting rid of it. And then next I have The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami. This is a Japanese author, and I believe he mostly writes kind of magical realism, kind of weird books. And I had heard about him from a couple different booktubers, and so I was like, oh, I'm kind of interested the way they talked about it. And then this last year, I've had some other people that I know and trust read his books. And the more I hear about it, the more I think they're probably not for me. In the fact that it seems like there's a lot more stream of consciousness, which is not something I'm a fan of. And that also there's weird sexual things, weird sex scenes. But since I already own this one, I just figured I would give him a chapter and just see how his writing style does. I mean, if he writes more stream of consciousness, then I probably will notice that right away and can make my decision and then decide if I actually want to keep this book or not. And then the next one is Magic Hour by Kristen Hanna. I had read The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna a couple years ago and really loved it. And I know a lot of other people love her more recent releases, so this is one of her backlist. And I just don't know if I'm going to like her backlist or not. I did try to read one of her backlist books, and now, it's called Firefly Lane. I tried Firefly Lane a few years ago before I read The Nightingale, and I DNF'd that. I just could not get interested in it, so I'm just not sure if her backlist is gonna be for me. And the next I have This Is How It Always Is by Lori Frankel, and I bought this on the recommendation of an in-real-life friend. She was reading it while we were on vacation together, and she said it was really good, so I picked it up. But then since then I've heard conflicting views. I've heard some people say it's amazing, and then I have heard some other people say they didn't like it because of the representation, because I believe the main character in this is a trans child. And I think that it's not own voices representation, and some people think it's kind of weird that it mostly focuses on the parents and how they feel about having a child who is trans. And so I'm just not sure. I thought I would give it a chapter, see if it pulls me in, and then I'll make the decision for me whether I want to continue. And then the last book I have is The Reckless Oath We Made by Bryn Greenwood. And I don't know anything about this book, but it was given to me by a friend. So I have a friend that does Book of the Month, and so every once in a while she'll just pass on the books after she read them to me. She thought I would like this, but I know absolutely nothing about it, and that's the only reason I haven't picked it up. It's not because I've heard anything bad about it. It's just I really have no idea what it's about. So I figure by reading the first chapter, I can find out if it's something I'm interested in and maybe actually read the synopsis and figure out what it is. So those are the 5. I'll let you know when I have read the first chapter of something. All right, so the first book that I decided to read a chapter of was Magic Hour by Kristen Hanna. And first I read through the synopsis because I couldn't remember. I had bought this at a used bookstore just because it was Kristen Hanna and I had just read The Nightingale, but I didn't know really what this was about when I bought it. And for the back cover, we following a few characters. there is a woman named Julia who is a psychiatrist, and something has happened with her practice or in her life that has made her having to leave. I think she was in Los Angeles and now she's moving back into her hometown, which is in the Pacific Northwest. And pretty soon after she arrives to this small town, a girl, I think a 6-year-old girl, it says, walks out from the forest, and she's all alone and she's not speaking. So something has happened to her. And I think that as a psychiatrist, Julia is trying to help figure out what is going on with this little girl. And yeah, so that's what we hear from the back of the book. And then I read the first chapter, and it was pretty long. It was 18 pages, which, in really tiny font, so enough to establish the characters. And we actually got from 3 different perspectives. First, we heard from Julia, and we find out why she's having to leave Los Angeles and like what happened in her psychiatric practice that made her have to leave. And then the second perspective was the little girl, and she's like, this is when she's still out in the woods and kind of like surviving on her own. So this is before she leaves the woods. And then the third perspective is a police officer in the town, and we find out that she is Julia's sister. So in that first chapter, we find out, so this is Julia's sister. Julia was the psychiatrist returning home, and her sister is the police chief. So those are the 3 people we are following. I was interested in this first chapter. I thought each of the perspectives had something that drew me in and made it interesting, like following Julia and what happened to her and all that stuff. There was like a little court case at the beginning, and that was interesting. And then finding out what happens to the little girl is intriguing to me. And then also the police chief, like, that one was probably the least interesting section, but I think it was just introducing the town, and it does seem like a nice setting to put a book like this in, because Pacific Northwest is beautiful, but then this is also really close to like the uncharted, forest where, so it has that kind of like almost mysterious element, because there's like, not a lot of people that live in that area. So from that first chapter, I am intrigued. I am going to keep this one and at least, read farther before I make a firm decision. But at this point, I don't see any reason to get rid of it, because it did pull me in from each of the storylines, and I kind of want to see where it goes. I did read in some reviews that there is some talk about autism in this that might not be the best representation. So if we get to that part of the book and it doesn't feel comfortable for me to be reading it, if it feels like bad rep, then I might DNF it at that point. But at this point, there was nothing of that yet, and so I want to at least give it more time to see how I feel about that on my own. So that's the first one. All right, so on to book 2. I ended up reading the first 3 chapters of this book because they were really short, and there are 2 perspectives, at least 2 perspectives this book is told from, and the second perspective didn't come until the 3rd chapter, so I figured I might as well at least read until I heard his perspective as well, and it was only like 16 pages. So I did read the synopsis before I started reading this, but actually I feel like the synopsis doesn't really make sense. I didn't really get what the book was about, and that's probably why I haven't picked it up in like the 2 years I've had this book. It was given to me by a friend, so I didn't know anything about it ahead of time. The synopsis didn't really make any sense to me, so I feel like I have more of a clear idea actually from reading those first 16 pages. So we are following, at least at this point, 2 different people. The first person is Z, who at the very beginning, she's doing a drug deal. So she's, it seems like having trouble making money and things like that. So she is ferrying this, some drugs from one place to another and getting paid for it. And when she comes back from her drug deal, like the whole time that she's gone, she hasn't heard from her sister, and she has to bring her nephew on this drug deal because she doesn't have anything, doesn't know where her sister is, where his mother is, and things like that. And then when that is finished, and that's just in the very first chapter that happens, she finds out that something has happened to her sister. I don't want to reveal what it is or anything like that, but because of that, she ends up going to their mother's house to kind of like find out what's going on with the sister and things like that. And when they get to that house, this man named Gentry, who it sounds like has been stalking Z for a long time, kind of is the person that helps them get through all the reporters and things like that, because everybody's crowding around them since something has happened, and he's the one that kind of helps them out. And I think that's what brings him into Z's life officially. Like, it sounds like he hasn't been like maliciously stalking her, but has been just kind of following her around this whole time. So still a stalker, but has never like threatened her or anything like that. And now he is officially like been pulled into her life at the beginning of this book. And so the third chapter is from his perspective. And his perspective was interesting because they haven't said exactly what is going on with him. Like, he must have some kind of condition or something, because his entire chapter is in like Middle English, and that's all he speaks. So like his perspective is all from that. Like, he talks about Z as my lady, and I am sworn to protect my lady. I am the lady's champion. Like, those are the things he's saying, and all of it is written in Middle English, which was interesting. I'm not sure how many times, the book is from his perspective, so that could be hard to read if a lot of it is in Middle English. But so far, that sounds interesting. Some very different things are happening in this book, pulling me in. So I definitely think now that I kind of am getting more about what this book is about, it sounds more interesting to me. It actually makes me want to pick it up and keep reading. The writing style, other than the Middle English, the writing style from Z's perspective was interesting and pulled me in. So yeah, even from 16 pages, I am intrigued on what's going on in here. So another one that I will be keeping and reading more of. All right, already on to the next book because I barely made it 6 pages. Okay, so I picked up The Lost Continent by Bill Bryson, and I had said in the beginning that I just wasn't sure if Bill Bryson was for me, that I read A Walk in the Woods, and I enjoyed it. And I used to own a lot of his books, but I'd gotten rid of several of them because they just didn't appeal to me anymore. I kept this one because I think it was supposed to be about like the small town in America. And since I'm from small town America, I thought it might be interesting. But yeah, I made it 6 pages, and then, I don't know, it started off pretty funny, kind of like self-deprecating his own small town that he grew up in. But then he started to get into more specifics, and you can tell this book was written in 1989. I looked it up because I'm like, this has to be an older book, because it started off like kind of just self-deprecating his own town, but then it got to like a bunch of stereotypes and bad things saying about whole groups of people. And yeah, it was pretty offensive where I ended. So basically, he's kind of going through kind of the stereotypes about the men all being farmers, and then he starts talking about the women all being sensationally overweight. That's a quote. And that, started me thinking, maybe this isn't for me. And then we get to the part where I was like, no, I am done. And I'm going to read this quote so I can let you understand why I'm just not going to read any more of this book, and possibly not read any more Bill Bryson, especially none that was written this long ago. But I'll just warn you right now that it's going to be sexist, and it's going to be what I consider predatory. So, he's talking about all of the women being fat, but then he says, I will say this, however, and it's a strange, strange thing. The teenage daughters of these fat women are always utterly delectable, as soft and gloriously rounded and naturally fresh smelling as a basket of fruit. He's talking about girls, like underage girls, and calling them delectable. That is disgusting, and it keeps going. I'm not going to read the rest of it, but yeah, he keeps going on about these teenage girls. And sorry, I am not going to continue reading this. And I'm not sure I'm going to read any more Bill Bryson ever again, because just that paragraph was just so gross. And yeah, you could tell this was not written in modern times, because I can't imagine anybody writing that nowadays, and it just, yeah, not gonna continue that. So this one is definitely going on the Unhaul pile. So I ended up reading a little bit of the next 2 books, so I'm gonna talk about both of them. So first I read a chapter of This Is How It Always Is by Lori Frankel. And like I said, this is from the parents' point of view. So in the very beginning, we're following this woman just talking about, each of her children being born. She had 4 boys, and she always wanted a daughter. So she did all these like kind of old wives' tales to have a daughter as her 5th child. And then she conceives a 5th child and like kind of a lot of talking about what's going on in their life during the pregnancy, and then they have their 5th child, and it's a boy named Claude. And from the back of the book, we know that Claude, well, it doesn't actually use the word trans. It just says that Claude loves wearing dresses and dreams of being a princess, and when he grows up, Claude says he wants to be a girl. So that's all I know so far about this one. I did like the writing in the first chapter, so I'm interested to give it a chance and kind of see what my thoughts are about it, since a friend that I trusted recommended it to me. So I am gonna keep this one and continue. Not a lot was going on in that first chapter in terms of like the meat of the story, so I want to at least like see where it's going. And then next I picked up The Wind Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami, and I ended up not reading the entire first chapter because it was pretty long, so I read like half of the first chapter and skimmed it, and I just don't think that his writing is for me. I said that in the beginning that it's not like full-on stream of consciousness or anything, but it is just kind of feels like just random topics, like one thing after another happening, and not really like following a real plot necessarily. I don't know. At least in that first chapter, it just seemed like a lot of different things happening in his day, and we were just kind of following him along in his day and what's going on, and nothing was really compelling me. And like I said, I heard that he has a lot of like weird sexual things in his book, and there was already a scene of that in the first 10 pages. And yeah, it just isn't really my style, so I think I'm gonna pass this on. It's a nice copy, so somebody else will enjoy it, because I know that he is loved by a lot of people, but just don't think, especially with it being like a 600-page book, if I wasn't thinking I was really interested in it at the beginning, I don't want to like push myself through that big of a book when I just don't think he's going to be the author for me. So that's all 5 of these adult books that I read, and so I'm going to get rid of The Wind Up Bird Chronicle, and I'm going to pass on The Lost Continent by Bill Bryson for very good reasons. I think it was time to get rid of that one. And then I'm going to keep these 3, This Is How It Always Is, Magic Hour, and The Reckless Oath We Made, and I'll at least give them, more time and see if they are ones I'm interested in finishing. All of these did pull me in enough in the first chapter that I think that they could be good reads if I keep going on them. So that's it for me this time. If you've read any of these and you want to talk about them down below, I'd love to hear from you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.